Thank you for that kind introduction. My name isn't the easiest to pronounce. You did well. Thank you. Good afternoon. When I went to school, grade school, high school, we learned history by way of the big events and the big names of the important people. So we learned about the Declaration of Independence. We learned about the Emancipation Proclamation. We learned about President Lincoln. We learned about Pearl Harbor and D-Day. But there's another way of learning about history, and it has to do with looking at the small events. Some of you may have seen the wonderful series on the Civil War that was done by Ken Burns. In that series, he presented to us letters from the common soldiers, letters from their wives, and we learned about the Civil War through the common people that were there. It's a very different kind of learning of history, and one that I think is very valuable. I'd like to tell you a story about a very small event, a car crash, as a matter of fact, that I think has really had a profound effect on our history. But before I describe that, I need to go back and talk a little bit about how we were in America before the car crash. Those of you that are old enough might remember a very popular TV show from 1954 to 1960. That leaves you guys out. It was called Father Knows Best. You saw the reruns. It told this episode by episode stories of an idealized, typical American family. The father, Jim, the mother, Margaret, and their 3 children. Every episode went the same way pretty much. One of the kids had a problem, and they didn't know how to solve the problem. At the end of the show, Dad sits down with the child and gives them his wisdom. And they said, "Oh, thank you, Dad, you're so wise. You solved our problem." A little footnote. Usually about 2/3 of the way through the episode, the mother in the family, Margaret, talked to the father and gave him the inside story. So that father knew best because mom had told him about the inside story. Every episode ended with the title of the TV show, Father Knows Best. That concept of Father Knows Best has a long history. The Romans talked about the father of the family, pater, having the complete control over his wife and children. But that also meant that he had responsibility for their welfare. And so throughout history in the West, this concept of paternalism, father knowing and doing what was best for his family, extended. And so by the 20th century, it included doctors who, as professional people, highly educated, knew what was wrong with their patients and typically did what was best to cure their patients of whatever disease they might have been struggling with. I can remember a story told by my aunt when I was a little boy. At a family gathering, she had come home from the hospital and was telling us that when she went to see her doctor said to her, "You know, you're not going home tonight. You're going to the hospital because I'm operating on you tomorrow morning." And she said, "Okay." Doctor knows best. That's the way we thought. That's the way we understood the relationship between doctor and patient back in the 50s and the 60s. And paternalism is not bad, it's a good thing. Doctors did what was best for their patients. On December 11th, 1983, in Missouri, a young woman named Nancy Cruzan, 25 years old at the time, was in a terrible car crash. She was thrown from the car ended up face down in a ditch that had a bunch of water in the bottom of it. When the paramedics arrived, she was unresponsive. They were able to get a heartbeat, rushed her to the hospital, but she was never able to come out of a coma. After 3 weeks, she was determined to be in a persistent vegetative state. Doctors inserted a feeding tube to nourish her. After some time, her parents really believed that Nancy would not want to live that way, and so they requested that the hospital remove the feeding tube. The hospital refused, saying that they had no proof that those were Nancy's wishes. The Cruzans sued the hospital, and the case went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court made its judgment, they sided with the hospital in the state of Missouri. And their argument was this: the hospital deserved to have clear and convincing evidence of what Nancy's wishes were. And her parents' word was not good enough. In the aftermath of that decision, her parents were able to gather information from Nancy's friends, letters, etc., and they presented the evidence to the court in Missouri, and the court agreed that this was indeed clear and convincing evidence, and they gave permission for the parents to order the hospital to remove the feeding tube, which they did, and Nancy passed away 11 days later. This tragic car crash opened the door for us to start thinking about patient rights and having advanced directives in place so that if we ever do become incapacitated, there will be clear and convincing evidence of what our wishes are when we can't speak for ourselves. And so many of us know about living wills and durable power of attorney for healthcare documents. It is a good thing for us to have those completed because we never know when we may be incapacitated and unable to speak for ourselves. And so a small, seemingly insignificant little event has really changed our American history in the way we think about the relationship between doctors and patients, ourselves and hospitals, and even the way the law looks at the doctor-patient relationship. We have laws in place now to protect our rights as patients. So that's an important thing that happened with that simple, tragic car crash. Today, we no longer live in a society where doctor knows best. Today, our society is more like patient knows best. We are the decision makers regarding our healthcare choices. Of course, that doesn't mean doctors don't know anything and they don't do anything. The role of a doctor today has evolved to be one who informs us of what our options are when we have a healthcare problem. And it's our responsibility to listen and learn all of the implications of various possible healthcare treatments that might be available to us. Because it is our body, it's our health, it's our life. And so if you take, for example, a person who has chronic back pain, they're going to want to know the pros and cons of a treatment by way of medication. They want to know the pros and cons of traction. They want to know the pros and cons of a surgery. And it's up to the doctor to give us that information so that when we make a decision for ourselves, it will be truly an informed decision that we can go forward with. And so we live in a society where we have the right to make decisions for ourselves. And it is good for us to learn from our doctors, to do the research about various treatments so that we can make a truly informed consent decision. Now, in my experience, people seem to be very willing and desirous of knowing the implications of various healthcare treatments. And that's good. But when it comes to other areas of life, we don't seem to be so interested in learning all of the implications of our choices. I'd like to think about this from the perspective of our dietary choices. We want to know all about our health care. We don't want to know too much about what's in our food. Some people are getting there, but very few people are really being all that concerned about what's in their food and the implications of that. Think about smoking. We all know that smoking's bad, but it was back in the 50s when doctors and researchers first started giving us studies that told us about the dangers of smoking. And it's really taken the better part of 50 years for us to finally come to grips with how dangerous smoking really is. And so now we have laws that restrict smoking to various places, etc. And so that's been a good thing. Another thing that we're learning more about is the negative impact of sugar on our bodies. I came across some statistics. In 1815, the average American ate about 5 pounds of sugar in a year. In 2015, 100 pounds of sugar. According to the math people at Ursuline, that is a 1,900% increase in the amount of sugar we are ingesting into our body in the course of a year. No wonder we have problems with diabetes and obesity in our society. Our bodies have not been able to keep up with the amount of sugar that we keep taking in. And we know sugar's in everything. I don't know how we could ever get away from eating foods without any sugar in it at all. But we need to be working with our elected officials, etc., to get them to give us foods with less processed sugar and stuff in it. It's really important for our health going forward. The last example I'd like to give has to do with meat and dairy products. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, an average American eats about 1 ton of food in a year, 2,000 pounds. Of that, about 200 pounds, or 10%, is meat. 30% of what we take in the course of a year is dairy products. Milk, yogurt, cheese, and ice cream. That is a huge part of what we take in. And studies are coming out that are beginning to show us more and more about some of the negative side effects of meat products and dairy products on our health. I just ask you to be a good consumer, to be an informed consumer. Look at what it is that you're choosing to eat. Just as smokers had to study and learn about the impact of smoking on their lives and then come to an informed decision whether to stop or not. And by the way, not everyone stops smoking. We still have 48 million people in our country that know about the dangers and continue to smoke. It's going to be the same for us with regard to our meat and dairy products. We need to learn, we need to get informed, and then we need to make decisions for ourselves. We live in a time when it is patient knows best. We know best. We make the decisions. But please don't think that that gives us the right or the freedom to do everything and anything without being in good consultation with our doctors, with our professionals, with those who are doing research in this area. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our families, we owe it to our health for us to be well informed about our dietary choices going forward. Thanks very much.